Welcome to the Lawyerist Podcast, a series of discussions with entrepreneurs and innovators about building a successful law practice in today's challenging and constantly changing legal market. Lawyerist supports attorneys building client-centered and future-oriented small law firms through community, content, and coaching, both online and through the Lawyerist Lab and Accelerator. And now, here are the co-authors of the Small Firm Roadmap and your podcast hosts.
Hi, I'm Laura Briggs.
And I'm Stephanie Everett, and this is episode 283 of the Lawyerist Podcast, part of the Legal Talk Network. Today we're talking with Erica Keswin about bringing your human to work.
Today's podcast is brought to you by BackOffice Bettys, Text Expander, CaseText, and LawPay. We wouldn't be able to do this show without their support. Stay tuned. We'll tell you more about them later on. Stephanie, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that occasionally comes up with members of our Lawyerist Lab community, and that is getting a handle on your email inbox and deciding maybe when is the point that you can outsource that to someone else.
Yeah, what an idea. That's usually pretty radical for folks, but you actually do not need to be in charge of your inbox. Let that sink in.
So true. I think that a lot of us feel, oh, well, there's so many nuances to my inbox. I could never possibly explain it to someone else. Do you have recommendations on first steps when you're thinking about what do you need to do before you even consider outsourcing it to someone else? You probably need to clean up the email inbox a little bit or come up with some sort of a system, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at 5,000 emails in your inbox right now, let's just call it a day, archive them all, and start fresh. Right? I mean, is that what you would say, or do you have better advice?
No, that's what I would recommend. I was talking to an email marketing expert recently about my own inbox, and that's what he recommended. He's like, if there's anything older than 3 days, go ahead and just archive it. And I kind of froze when he said that, and I was like, no. He goes, okay, if we can't do 3 days, how do you feel about a month? And I was like, okay, if it's older than a month, as long as it's archived and I could find it if I needed to, that's a good place to start. But I think that's a really good point because you don't want to be handing a total mess to someone else who's going to step in and work on your email inbox. So come up with things that you can easily get rid of first, and then maybe think about how do you engage the person you outsource to help you set up that system for what will happen when emails come in after that point.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing here to think about, we're so used to thinking, but I have to be the one to read it or, so first of all, let's just say if you're the owner of the firm and you have sensitive emails, I mean, you could tell people like, don't send HR related emails to my inbox because I'm now going to let someone else check those emails, right? So that's just something you can do on the front end and kind of get rid of those type of communications.
Yeah, you have to think about who all has the current email address that you're using, and do you need to redirect some of the people if you've been using it as a catch-all, if you've got all kinds of different things coming into your inbox. That was definitely something I thought about. Well, if you outsource this and you have things coming from your CPA and signatures on important forms, maybe you don't want that to be seen by everybody, but it does seem like something where you could build this up to being able to hand it off to somebody else. And do you recommend just going 100% out of your email inbox? Do you think that's possible for a lawyer?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, here's the deal. The person who's checking your inbox, they're like the air traffic controller, right? Like their job is to distill the messages and only put those things in front of you that you really need, or to organize your emails in such a way that you can then process them. Because what you don't want, and what way too many attorneys do, is they use their inbox as their daily agenda. Like you get into the office and you're like, what am I going to do today? I don't know, let me open my inbox and it'll come to me, or I'll just do this thing. And then we just hand our agenda over to like 250 plus strangers in the day. And so the whole point of doing this is getting you out of that mode and getting you to focus on those things that you need to focus on. So it's not that you're never going to see another email. It's that this other person is going to be there to put all of the, Banana Republic coupons or whatever you got coming into your inbox or, or ABA journal articles or, here's the latest, like maybe you want to read that, but they can all go into a reading folder that are there when you have time to read, right? So you can just have a rule. All these type of articles put into this folder. There's probably a whole bunch of emails, you've probably never realized this, that you respond this same way to all the time, right? So Sorry, but that's just the truth. It happens for me too. So now I use snippets, or you can use Text Expander. One of our sponsors today is a great product, but you can build out these common responses, and then you can say, okay, when this kind of message comes in, send this response. And by the way, the response could be, hey, I got your email. I need to think this over, and I'll get back to you by the end of the day or by the end of the next day. And then that person could respond to someone and then say to you, okay, here are the 5 messages I really need you to pay attention to and help me and respond.
Absolutely. And there's so many great tools out there. You mentioned a couple of them already, but there are ways of organizing your inbox too to make sure that you're only seeing the things that are unread or are the most important. And so take advantage of those tools however you can. You don't have to feel like you have to be in control of your inbox. And I think you've made a really good point that you're essentially handing your to-do list off to every person who's jumping into your inbox. So this is a great way to kind of reclaim control. Now we've got a brief sponsored conversation with Jordan Turk from LawPay, and then my conversation with Erica.
Hi, I'm Jordan Turk. So I'm a practicing family law attorney, and I'm also the legal content and compliance manager with LawPay.
We are excited to chat with you. What I want to start off with is we talk a lot about meeting your clients where they're at, delivering the service expectations that are in line with the way they interact as consumers today. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the trends in paying for legal services?
Yeah, actually, there's a recent TSYS study that found that 79% of people now prefer to pay with a credit or debit card, which kind of aligns with this mentality, this Amazon, Uber, online mentality where I want to be able to pay for something online. I want to be able to click a button and I want to be able to pay it. What I don't want to do is have to fish out my checkbook, write a check to you, and then figure out how to get this check to you.
Yeah, exactly. I think people are looking for ways that things can be seamless and simple for them. So you definitely make yourself more appealing by having that option available to you. Are there concerns that attorneys might have around starting to accept those kinds of credit card payments?
Yeah, so I think a lot of, for one, an attorney's big hesitancy in order to take these credit cards is always going to be the fees, right? Because they're saying that's going to cut into my bottom line and why should I do it? But in reality, it's a trade off, right? It's a trade off of giving your clients convenience over that fee. And then also, you're going to make that fee up in the back end anyway. So if the question is, would I rather get paid now and, be charged a 3% fee, or would I rather wait and see if I'm going to get paid in a week and wait for a check to come in the mail? I'm going to take the credit card all day long.
Do you have other recommendations around getting paid faster? I think that's a common challenge for a lot of attorneys, and no one wants to spend that time after the fact chasing down the client who hasn't paid or says they've mailed their check and it never came in. So, do you have recommendations around other things that attorneys can do to be mindful of getting paid more quickly?
Oh, yeah. I mean, story of my life as a baby attorney, right, was trying to figure out why are people paying me or why are they saying that they're paying me, but I can't, but I don't have this money in my account. So I learned a lot kind of going through that and seeing what I could do receivables wise. So the first one is, in law school, they tell you, hey, here's maybe how you're going to practice law, or here's maybe how you're going to be an attorney. But what they don't tell you is, oh, hey, you're also going to have to be an advocate for yourself, and you're also going to have to be a salesman. So my big thing, just even at the initial client meeting, I want to put some pressure on that client and I want them to sign that day. I don't want them to leave to have to go find a checkbook or to get a money order or anything like that. So what I do is when they come in and they meet with me, they want to hire me. I tell them, hey, this is great, but I don't begin work until I receive my fee agreement and until I receive your retainer. Now, if you want me to begin work immediately, that's completely possible. You just have to write me a check, pay me some cash, or hey, I also take credit cards. So very easy to do it that way. Now on the back end, when you're actually bill collecting, you just have to be very cognizant and very scheduled about how you're pursuing your payments, right? So the invoices go out. And I always want to give the clients the convenience to pay online because they can just go in, log in and pay it. And then I just get a nice little email that says, hey, they've paid their bill, which is the best email that I receive all day. And so you do that. And then also pick a day about a week after you send out that invoice and schedule it on your calendar, block it out. And for an hour, you need to be going and you need to be following up on those payments to see if people have actually paid their invoices. And if not, you have to be sending them an email. Don't do this on a Friday because nobody wants to pay you on a Friday and you still want your clients to like you.
Yes.
That was my big, I had some learning experiences with that.
Well, yeah, that's probably the first thing you think about is, okay, the rest of my week is so busy, so let me go ahead and slot this on my Fridays. But on a Friday afternoon, some people are already mentally checked out, and the last thing they want to think about is one additional bill that they have to pay. If you have a client that isn't paying attention to that email about the invoice, is there any recommendation around how you continue to follow up after that? Is that the point for a phone call or some different type of approach?
Absolutely. And I think that's another thing that you learn as you go on in your practice. If you're the one that's having to account for your receivables, is I have zero problems now calling clients and saying, hey, I sent you an email, just wanted to put that on your radar. You're behind, you owe X amount of money. I would absolutely follow up with a phone call. What I'll also do is there's specific features in different payment avenues that you can use, but LawPay has one where you can send an email out and you can specify the amount of money that you want this person to pay. So usually before mediation, it's $1,000 mediation fee. So I'll send the client an email and call them and say, hey, you have to pay this. Mediation's tomorrow. And they can just go in, click on it. It already has the $1,000 populated, and then we're good to go.
Perfect. So meet your clients right where they're at and have those systems in place to be able to follow up and make sure you get paid. LawPay is a member benefit of all 50 state bar associations, and LawPay was developed to give lawyers a compliant way to take credit cards. If you want to get started, check out lawpay.com/partners/lawyerist to learn more. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erica Keswin, and I am a workplace strategist, an author, speaker, and founder of the Spaghetti Project, which is a platform that shares the stories and science of connection at work. In 2018, I wrote my book, Bring Your Human to Work, 10 Sure Ways to Design a Workplace That's Good for People, Great for Business, and Just Might Change the World. It was published by McGraw-Hill, and I'm working on a second book that's going to come out in January of 2021. Called Rituals Roadmap, the human way to transform everyday routines into workplace magic. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I am thrilled to have you here, and I'm a fan of your first book already. So I'm excited to see that I'm going to be able to read your next book as well and probably get so many valuable nuggets out of that. I found that the book could not really be coming at a better time as far as our conversation here on the Lawyerist podcast. You have so many excellent ideas within the book about really building a company culture and the way that you show up to work as a leader in a way that takes the values off the walls and into the halls. That's something that you talk about in the book. And we work a lot with the attorneys in Lawyerist Lab and in our insider community creating values. How do you recommend that business owners make those values into living and breathing ideas that are absorbed by everybody?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's not rocket science, but it's also not that easy. So the first thing companies need to think about is to not have too many values. Some companies will have 10, 12, 14 values. And the first problem with that is that most people, if you walk around the office, can't remember them. And the second thing is that chances are they're not driving any kinds of behavior. And so the litmus test that I like to use is called the fork in the road. When you're at the fork in the road and you're trying to decide, should I hire this person? Should I fire this person? Should I take on this new client? Should I, expand into a different area of the law? All of these different things that might come up in your business, your values should help drive those decisions. And if they're not, either the values aren't clear or perhaps there are too many. So step number one is really making sure you know the values. From there, what I often talk about is alignment. You need to then align these values in all of the different ways that your business works. So if, let's say, collaboration is something that's a very strong company value for your particular law firm, you need to build that into how you recruit people, how you select people, how you onboard people, how you recognize performance, and how you thank people. All of those different aspects, the values need to be connected and aligned, and that's the way to get them off the walls and into the halls.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And you made me think of one of the values that we have here at Lawyerist, which is that we grow as people. And there are some great stories in your book about different companies that have taken employee well-being into perspective when thinking about what kind of culture do we want to create and how do we create opportunities for people to grow, not just professionally, but personally. Can you expand a little bit on, if you're the small firm business owner, how do you really take into account how important employee well-being is and start to come up with a real program that references that back to your values?
So first you have to define what is well-being or what does personal and professional development mean in your organization. And sometimes, especially in a small company, you can engage the people that you work with as part of that and find out what's important to them. It's crazy in a small company to, provide benefits and opportunities in one area that may not even be of interest or something that people want. So to me, having those conversations is a great way to engage your employees in that conversation. I was having a chat yesterday with someone that runs a business and they were talking about wellness, and they had a very specific way that they offered certain kinds of reimbursements in the wellness area. And she shared with me that, especially, we're taping this podcast today in May 2020 and we're in quarantine, that part of what she wanted to do was really make wellness personal, to your point and to your question. And she said, you know what? People are home. Like, I want to give them reimbursement if they are taking an exercise class online, or perhaps if they want to learn how to meditate, or maybe the wellness is more around professional development or personal development, and they're participating in a book club, and we're going to give them a stipend for books. And so I think it's really being open and being willing to take feedback on what people want. And to me, the name of the game right now, especially in this moment, is about taking everything personally.
Absolutely. That's a great point because everything does feel so personal, especially for everyone who maybe wasn't remote before this pandemic. But now those lines are blurred between your personal and professional, even if you have a home office or a place where you're
Exactly.
working from home. I mean, it's very hard to separate that as much from your personal life. And I imagine that giving employees access to wellness programs and opportunities to take online courses or do things like that serves them outside of their job, but also increases their overall loyalty and excitement
Mhm.
about their job and the way that you've thought about them as more than just an employee. You've really thought about them as a person and as a part of the team. And so I love those concepts for sure.
I would just add one thing to that, which is, in a small company, many people will say to me, well, I don't have the budgets. I'm not, one of these major global law firms or Facebook or Google where I have these budgets for all of this professional development. And one of the things I talk about in the book is that I give examples of companies with 10 people, with 20 people, with 50 people, about how to do that. And sometimes, in terms of professional development, it's going around and talking to your employees and saying, what do you want to learn, and what can you teach others, and what are the kinds of development opportunities that you want to have? Do you want to become a better speaker? Do you want to write an article? So in addition to being a lawyer or working in the field of law, there are often many other kinds of skills that people want to develop. And so all we need to do as leaders is to ask them and then match them with those opportunities when they come up. And the best thing about it is that it often literally does not cost a dollar.
Right. And that resonates so much with this idea you're talking about in the book of the ways that people get attracted to particular teams or particular opportunities. We're often saying at Lawyerist that we don't think law should be practiced the way it's been practiced for the last 200 years just for the sake of upholding a tradition. And there's so many cultural shifts and career shifts that are happening in the marketplace right now. And one of the things you mention in the book is that people are not picking their next job based on the size of the paycheck. They are looking for a company that has a worthwhile mission and a promising team to join. And when you hear these examples of these bigger companies like the Google and the Facebook, and you mentioned so many different companies like Slack within the book, how do you incorporate that as the owner of a smaller business, like a law firm that maybe has 10 employees or maybe a little above or beyond that? How do you incorporate sharing that mission and showing that you are a worthwhile team and you're truly a community of people that work together?
So I would say that I don't believe there's necessarily a correlation between size of company and having a strong mission. Sometimes I would even argue the opposite, that it's easier to define and almost maintain that mission and culture when you're smaller. People will say to me that as they begin to scale, that's when things begin to fall apart because you're hiring all kinds of people that aren't aligned with who you are and your values. So, as a small company, I think that there is so much that you can do. When we think about today, what young people, when we talk about what millennials and Gen Z want from work, there is also which actually is a bit of a misnomer. What they want really is what all of us want. They just weren't afraid to ask for it. So, the top three things that people want is number one, they want to feel connected to your point to a mission. They want to work in a flexible way, which, lo and behold, all of a sudden, even the people that were the biggest naysayers around,
Right.
remote work are now saying, I guess we can work at home, which I think for many of us, especially many women, will be a huge bonus when we go back to work in whatever way we go back. And the third thing they want is what we talked about earlier, is to grow and develop on the job. It is just knowing and understanding what your employees want and then figuring out ways to deliver on that. And as a small business, getting together and putting down on paper as a start, what is our mission? What do we stand for? And making sure that there's an aspect of giving back to the world. So many law firms, even small ones, have a pro bono component and they think about ways that they can use their skills to help others. And so to me, that's one of the biggest benefits that law firms, big and small, can think about. They may not be doing it for as many hours, but the fact that a firm has been thoughtful about how to have their employees give back and use their skills and brains for a certain amount of time every year will go a long way to not only helping the world, but to creating that sense of connection between employees and employer.
So, do you recommend that a company or a firm owner engage in those conversations with employees first, or is there another step to that process before you start deciding what does that look like for us? How do we connect the mission and the values to the everyday practice and to the way that we hire and onboard people into the team? What are those different steps that someone who's at the helm of their business and is saying, you know what, I haven't really done that to this point. How can I start that process now and be more mindful of it
Mhm.
going forward?
So, what I would say is to get buy-in from others on your team, because I think one of the problems could be, especially in a smaller organization, if you're at the helm and you sort of say, you know what, these are our values and I'm going to go recruit people based on them and I'm going to pay people bonuses based on them, and if others don't agree that those are the values or those don't represent the essence and the soul of who and what the company is and stands for, I think there could be significant issues. So I would start with maybe meeting with each person. It depends on the size of the firm, but having a group meeting, talk about the goals. We're working toward codifying our values and not only defining them, but giving examples of when we have seen people living them and trying to collect as much information as you can. Oftentimes, companies will do this and they start off with 10, and then I push them and I say, well, can you narrow it down and narrow it down? So get buy in. At the end of the day, the person at the helm can certainly have the final decision. But if you are going to look to align these values to your processes, I strongly urge you to have everybody feel so excited about going to market, internally and also externally with those values, because that's going to represent you as an organization and you want everybody to be able to stand behind them. So then I would map out the employee experience and think about where these values can come to life. Think through your recruiting process. And again, I used the example earlier of collaboration, but when you're interviewing someone, ask questions that get at, has this person, give me an example where you had to work really closely with someone to get this document done late at night, or whatever questions are relevant to your business, and really try to solicit information about how they feel about these values.
That's a great point, and it goes back to what we were talking about of taking those values off the walls and into the halls. So you're incorporating them from the beginning of the employee experience. And I imagine too that they're being revisited on an ongoing basis. I mean, that's definitely something that I've seen at Lawyerist as well. There are these values, they're incorporated in the hiring process, but they're revisited from time to time with the team to get sort of feedback on, do these still apply to where the company is going and the types of things that we're working on now? And that's a great way to keep employees excited about the fact that they're helping to build something as well, in addition to the community culture within the company. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Support for today's episode comes from BackOffice Bettys, the only virtual receptionist service exclusively dedicated to small law firms that offers a plan with unlimited calls. Their highly specialized service boasts customized call handling, relentlessly friendly team members, and unmatched quality. The Bettys are ready to help you grow your firm, even when you're out of the office. Visit backofficebettys.com/lawyerist to try them out for 1 week free. Use the promo code PODCAST to receive $150 off your first month. Typing the same thing like your email address or phone number over and over is a productivity killer. Turn everything you need to type more than once into a snippet with Text Expander. Type an abbreviation you make and your snippet automatically expands. Text Expander works everywhere you type and helps you reduce errors and increase productivity. Text Expander is also available for companies so you can share snippets with everyone on your team. Text Expander is available for Mac, Windows, iPhone, iPad, and Chrome. Show listeners get 20% off their first year. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more. Looking for a true alternative to LexisNexis or Westlaw? You could save thousands this year if you switched to CaseText. Over 6,000 law firms from solos to 40% of the AM Law 100 use CaseText to help them find better results in less time and for less money. For $65 per month, you'll get access to 50 state and federal case law, statutes, and more with zero out-of-plan fees. Try the smarter legal research platform. Lawyerist podcast listeners can go to casetext.com/lawyerist to try CaseText for free for 2 weeks. All right, we are back. So one of the things that you mention in the book that really got my attention is this idea of appreciating all of the work that your employees do, not just their billable hours. And the billable hour is such an important and loaded phrase for attorneys.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear your insight into, how you can honestly do this for yourself too, as a practicing lawyer, to think about some of the other things you bring to the table, but also to create that excellent culture for your employees too.
Yeah, I think about this a lot, especially with law firms. And it is a challenge because if you want to make changes to your culture and to live these values, and if the only thing that people are recognized for and evaluated on is billable hours, it's not going to work. And so I know many law firms have been asking themselves that question for a very long time. I believe that, yes, a big portion is based on billable hours, but if you want people to invest in professional development, in giving back, in helping each other, in mentoring younger people, then those other things that are outside the realm of billable hours have to be recognized. I haven't been able to come up with any other magical answer to that question, but people behave in a way that's aligned to how they're recognized and valued and ultimately compensated for. And so if it's only focused on billable hours, that will be the only thing that they do, which is often not aligned with the values that you're saying you want them to live from the beginning. And there's oftentimes that contrast.
Right. And you don't want there to be that contrast where there's confusion about it. And so building a program where you recognize employees goes back again to a lot of what we've been talking about with these values. How do you decide what those company values are that are reflected in the way that you do work every day, but also reflected in the way that you recognize employees for the work that they're doing? I think that helps continue that connection between, yes, these are really a driving force behind our organization. And it another one of the things that you mentioned that I found was really interesting, especially in the legal profession, which tends to be affected so heavily by burnout and overwork. There's companies that are doing things like nudging their employees when it's time to go on vacation. And so lawyers often tend to struggle with that on their own, taking their own vacation and removing themselves from their practice enough for the firm to operate without them. But it also sounds like there's a leadership component to being aware of that with your team too.
Yeah, leaders need to lead by example and they need to walk the walk. And I see this in legal fields, I see this in banking. And, if you're emailing your employees at 3 o'clock in the morning, which actually there was a big article about that recently from a banker, and it got screenshotted and emailed out everywhere that he was very upset he did not hear back from his underlings at 3 a.m. They're setting the tone from the top in every way, shape, or form. And I agree with you that many people in professional services, they have trouble getting away and taking vacation. And when they do take vacation, they're actually still working. And that a piece of that goes back to the billable hours. And so it's looking at how can we restructure and work if you're going to take a vacation, bringing somebody else on board who knows what you're doing, who knows the client, to think about creative ways to collaborate. The only other option is for people to burn out, which leads to turnover, and turnover is very expensive. And that's a big piece of this. Bringing your human to work. The subtitle of the book is that it's good for people, great for business, and just might change the world. And all the things we're talking about are good for individuals. We feel better about going to work. We're more engaged and our job satisfaction goes up. But for those listening who are at the helm of these law firms, all of the things we've been talking about have a direct impact on the bottom line.
Right. It sounds like it has a ripple effect throughout, not just you as an individual or your company, but also this idea of it going out further into the community and becoming the new normal in a sense for the way that we decide to build a community inside your workplace as well.
Exactly.
So I want to shift gears a little bit. We were chatting a little bit before we started recording about someone shared a joke with me the other day. We're living in unprecedented times for use of the word unprecedented, but it's definitely true that it feels like things are being redefined on sometimes even a daily or a weekly basis right now. And one of the things that we've seen some attorneys struggle with is, how do I do business development? How do I keep operating so that I am bringing in money for that bottom line and so that I can afford to pay these employees that I've worked so hard to get the right people with the right values on my team? Can you talk a little bit about doing business development now in the midst of a pandemic?
Yeah. Even pre-pandemic, what I would often say to people is that all of us, and I was in consulting for so long, so I'm going to put myself in this bucket. Consultants, bankers, lawyers, we are all commodities. I could choose to use one lawyer, a different lawyer. I could use this consultant or this other consultant. Why am I picking one over the other? And many of them have the same give or take technical skills, and they are charging the same give or take billable rate. So how do I make my decision? I make my decision based on my relationship with that person. And so, how do you build the key? I would change the framing of this away from business development and more around relationship development and deepening and strengthening those relationships. So, I'm sure, like many of our listeners, you and I, every day we're doing these Zoom or WebEx calls, and we are all of a sudden overnight in each other's living rooms. You can't get much more personal than that. And people have been asking me, what's going to happen 6 months from now and a year from now? I don't know if we're going to be looking in each other's living rooms 6 months from now. I actually hope not. But we aren't going to forget what we saw. So, this actually, for people in professional services, is a huge opportunity. You are calling to check in, or should be, with all of your clients. Are you safe? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to support you? Not from a selling perspective, but from a human perspective. And while you're on Zoom with them, their kid walks by, the dog walks by, and you get to know, and you should ask, more about how they are doing in general. And what will happen is that you will be able to bring these experiences and these conversations and what you've learned about them and their lives into this new normal. And so to me, the focus is on deepening your current relationships. And as you meet new people, approaching them through the lens of checking in, how are you? Is there any way that I can support you? And I believe that by deepening those relationships now, just by connecting on a human level, it will only help us, those of us in service business, when things are back to normal, because you've gotten to know people in a much more personal way. And again, if your skills are the same and your technical abilities and you know the same area of the law as the person in the next firm and your billable rates are the same, this is and can be and will be the differentiator.
Right. We're often telling the attorneys that are coming to us, if you as the technician doing the actual legal work in the firm is the only thing that you do special, there is no way to differentiate yourself from other lawyers who are in the same practice area. It really goes about so much more than that. And I think that's important to keep in mind when you're reflecting back. One of the things that I have found to be really unique is I've worked remote for the last almost 10 years at this point. So I've always done Zoom meetings or Skype meetings and things like that. And it's second nature for us to just answer fine to the question, how are you? What has shifted since the pandemic is people are genuinely asking, how are you doing? How are you doing in these strange times? And especially, I'm married to a physician who's actively working in this entire situation. And you see people being much more willing to share those personal aspects of their life and talk about the loved one who's in a nursing home that they have legitimate concerns about, or they're worried about, are their children going to fall behind educationally because school and what education looks like has shifted so much. So I love that idea. We all know just how expensive it is to bring in a new customer, and building those relationships with your existing clients, not under the pretense of selling anything or you have a special limited time offer, but instead around this idea of, I'm genuinely reaching out to you, human, to see how you're doing and to just do a check-in. And in the process of that, you're building that relationship, and it's not something that they are likely to forget. Lots of people, especially the extroverts, are really struggling with the lack of human connection. And so the more that you can do that authentically, the more I think it will read very successfully to your intended audience.
I would also add to think about this outreach through the lens of giving back. So, again, even if you're in a small firm, how are you as an organization giving back right now? I mean, maybe there'll be some legal issues with first responders, or working together with just the people in your office, making cards for people in the local hospital. So, I would love for people to think about, how is the firm giving back in this moment, and urging people to think about individually how they're giving back. And some people will say, I'm so overwhelmed, I can't even add one more thing. This could be as, I mean, it doesn't have to cost anything and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. Checking in on an elderly neighbor, calling a relative, checking in on a friend who's homeschooling 3 kids. There is a lot of research that shows that there is a correlation between giving back and how we are feeling in terms of our own isolation and loneliness. So it helps on 2 levels. One, your employees feel better and more connected to themselves, to each other, to the firm. But also, many people have been saying, when the dust settles, how a company, how a law firm acted in this moment, how they treated their employees, how they treated their clients during this time. Maybe there's issues around billing, that they gave someone a break. This is how they're going to be remembered. And it's important to think about how you want to be seen and how you showed up during this time. And so I think that's another way to think about having an opportunity to connect and reach out to clients, perhaps depending on your area of the law, that you put together a free webinar or some type of information series to share information to be helpful to clients in this moment, and just figuring out ways and almost excuses, like what are opportunities to connect in a human way, to ask about them, to give them something without it feeling like a sale.
Right. And all of this seems to really hit home the importance of we're all rethinking where we're at right now. How is your business going to weather this storm and come out on the other side? And those are definitely important questions to be asking at this time, but not at the expense of leaving out some of these other important considerations, like how do you bring your human to work? How do you affect your employees and your community and the world at large through that? Well, Erica, thank you so much for the opportunity to get to learn more about some of these actionable steps that I feel like attorneys can be able to put these in place right away to start bringing their human to work.
Well, it was great talking to you, and I look forward to the next time.
The Lawyers Podcast is produced by Laura Briggs and edited by Christopher Ng. Are you ready to implement the ideas we discuss here into your practice? Wondering what to do next? Well, here are your first 2 steps. If you haven't read the Small Firm Roadmap yet, grab the first chapter for free right now at lawyers.com/book. Next, if you're looking for help beyond the book, then let's chat about whether our coaching communities are right for you. Head to lawyers.com/community to schedule a 15-minute call with our community manager. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not endorsed by Legal Talk Network. Nothing said in this podcast is legal advice for you.